Okay, so there you are. You're on this fire, what, 2 summers ago in Idaho? And what did you had a tender and some other resources. Take it from there.
So I was, well, I was banished actually to Division, Siberia, which is not an uncommon occurrence for me, but that's another story.
Division, Siberia. Okay.
We've all been there.
Sure. Yeah.
And I had a whole handful of resources. I think I had a couple Type 2 crews and some engines. It was the heel of the fire, and one water tender at the time. And
Contract water tender.
yeah, actually everybody there. Everybody on that division was contracted, including the Type 2 crews.
Okay.
But anyway, I'm taking over the division for a division supervisor that had gotten sick and had to leave demo fairly rapidly, and so I'm just trying to get acquainted. It was almost like at briefing that morning, hey, we need you to go do. So I'm just trying to figure things out. Classic, hey, we'll go out and see what we got when you get out there, and asking people, hey, what were you doing the day before? And we've all done this where it's just like in place of a plan, I just tell people, hey, just keep doing what you were doing until I figure out what I want to do.
Yep. Typical part of transitions, it seems like.
Exactly. Which I've now since learned, like, it's actually, I don't do that anymore. I try and come up with my own plan, even if it means losing some time. But anyway, as water tender, I'm going through asking everybody, and the operator's standing there, and I said, hey, so what have you been doing? He said, well, I've been going up and filling this Folda tank, and then sitting up there and then waiting until the end of the day and coming down and doing dust abatement on the road before the division leaves. And I said, okay, well, just go ahead and do that again. Not thinking anything of it. But the look that this operator gave me and the hesitation I saw really made me pause. And he started to walk away, actually, and I was like, "Hey, whoa, what's up, man? What's going on?" And he said, "No, no big deal." And we had this back and forth for a little bit, and then eventually I just said, "Hey, why don't we jump in my truck and take a ride up the road just to see?" And then he said, "Yes, yeah, that's great."
You hadn't been up there yet, right?
No, I hadn't even been up there yet. And so we jumped at the chance. We got in the truck, and just small talk where he'd been, and turns out he'd been a hot shot and knew some of the same folks and stuff like that. But anyway, we get up there and we're headed out there, and right away he jumps up and he goes, "Right there, see that spot?"
Okay, I gotta be that guy real quick. Sorry to interrupt. Travis is right in the middle of a great story. He was waving his arms around, super animated. Kind of a big deal moment in his kind of young division supervisor life from a couple summers ago. And it sucks that I had to just kind of jump in here real quick, but I just realized I haven't even told you what you're listening to yet. I think we have to do that. I think the FCC makes us do that. If not, I'm doing it anyways. This, of course, is the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center podcast. My name is Alex Victora, and the other guy you've been hearing from is, of course, Travis Dotson. We work together here in Tucson, Arizona at the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center. And we're talking to you today about something we call around here the contractor's dilemma. Let's get back to Travis's story here. Travis was right in the middle of telling us a story about a division he was on a couple summers ago and an interaction he had with a contract tender operator. And this guy had some concerns about a mission, and he and Travis jumped in Travis's truck, his Div Soup truck, and they drove up the road and had a look at what the tender operator was concerned about. Okay, so here's Travis.
That's why I don't want to drive this road. And it was a dip in the road combined with, it was a dip on the downhill side with a rock out on the uphill side that just, you can see if you think about it, would really rock a tender over to one side and loaded, that just made it a super bad road. And that makes perfect sense. But what intrigued me about it was, why didn't he just say that?
Right.
Why not just...
He knew there was an issue.
Yeah.
He'd been up there a bunch of times. Why didn't he just... He saw something. Why didn't he say something?
Yeah, if you see something, say something. That's
another issue.
Yeah, that's just...
another discussion for another day, that whole concept. But
yeah,
that's part of this discussion here, though, with this contractor, right?
Absolutely. And then, of course, then I was there for the rest of the tour and got to talking with him, got to know him, got to hear lots of great stories. And we talked about this dilemma that and it was just... It was so surprising to me that I had never thought of it before. But as a contractor, that evaluation is so crucial.
Yep. The evaluation, you were going to do an evaluation on him.
He had to get one.
Right.
There's not a choice.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to get an evaluation. And he's had experiences where bringing up a concern results in a bad evaluation. So that's just part of his memory.
Yeah,
right?
He's got a slide in the slide deck for what happens when you voice up a safety concern.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that can be abused, but so he's just got an extra layer of concern. Whereas a federal water tender, they could look at me and just go, no,
mm-hmm.
because of this, and there's no consequence. They just don't have to worry about it. And it's not like I think it was going to be confrontational in any way. They just don't have to worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
They can just very easily say, no, man, that's a sketchy road.
Sure.
And depending on who it is they're talking to, that might be great and it might end up being confrontational. But they don't have to worry about it.
Sure.
Because they're going to get the next roll, they're going to get the next call, probably not going to get an evaluation.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it was a great lesson for me, and I just started thinking about not only a contractor's dilemma, but all the different entities that we interact with in fire, and the the kind of the federal folks in wildland fire are the driving force, and we tend to think of things only from our perspective.
Sure.
And,
yeah.
And that dilemma is real. It does exist. And I think it plays a part in a lot of the risk that gets taken on. And you think about when I say contractors, who do you think of?
Yeah. Well, when I think of contractors, I think that there's two big groups, and that's, the first group, for whatever reason, is equipment. And I think of two sort of groups in the equipment group: tenders, water tenders, and dozers, or other sort of miscellaneous big machines that move things. But tenders and dozers, and then Type 2 hand crews are the groups
Sure.
I think of. But we could go on and on, right? There's all sorts of contractors or non-federal folks.
Yeah, exactly.
People who are not part of that, kind of that group. But with the contractors, it's unique because again, there's the importance of that evaluation, and we understand the contracting systems have changed over years to try to account for some of these things. But perception is reality, right? And if these folks have the perception, or if they actually have a slide in their slide deck that says, hey, that one time I voiced up, I had a concern about this mission or whatever, and that div soup or that task force leader or whatever dinged me on my evaluation, and I went down to the bottom of the list or whatever the case is. It's quite a thing.
Well, yeah, it's big, and it just adds more nuance to this whole discussion of risk assessment or dialogue about what's worthwhile and what's not. And
sure.
and I mean, the reason it's such a big deal to me is that we roll water tenders over on a regular basis.
We roll dozers over with some frequency.
Heavy equipment, it pretty much it goes down the line from size. The bigger you are, the more often you roll.
Right. Yeah.
And it just so happens the big machines that we use are often contractors. And in some instances with heavy equipment anyway, we're using them in environments or we're actually using some of that equipment to do things that equipment wasn't maybe necessarily designed for.
Yep. Last 2 seasons, I think, from the Northwest, we saw a number of cases where we had logging equipment that was maybe operating on slopes that, folks were not exactly used to. And we did it for a shift or 2 or 3, and we rolled a lot of equipment the last 2 summers up there.
Oh, yeah. Sure. And it's not, it'd be one thing if it was just the equipment, but people die.
Yeah.
It's super scary.
Yep.
And that dilemma, that whole having to be really cautious about what other groups, mainly federal folks, take for granted the ability to turn down an assignment.
Right.
You know what I mean? And having that be taught as part of your array of options or whatever is, if you don't agree with something, you don't think it's safe, or you feel like you don't have the skill set, any of those things.
Right.
Because that's another reason to turn down an assignment. It's like you take a type 2 crew out that's kind of throw together and from different people, how many times have somebody said, hey, you guys feel comfortable doing this? And you go, no, I just don't know my crew yet, or
Sure.
At least you can have that dialogue. There's any number of reasons to turn down or adjust an assignment or whatever. But man, if you're contracted and your work experience thus far is, I sign on to do a job, you do the job.
Right.
And if the job is driving up that sketchball road, hey man, that's what you signed up for.
Right.
And for a lot of folks, I think that's the world they come from.
Sure.
I don't know for sure, but
yeah. The other thing that's kind of baked in there is this idea that if somebody's asking me to do something, I'm not the division supervisor. I'm the tender operator in this equation. And if somebody, a division supervisor, task force, whatever, asks me to do something, well, that must mean that it's safe, air quotes, right? That they somehow have used, some piece of their experience. My overhead has used some piece of their background, history, training, whatever, and they have determined it's okay for me to take this machine up there.
Absolutely.
And,
the classic is heavy equipment boss, right? I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
You don't. We've had instances where the heavy equipment operator assumes that a heavy equipment boss is an operator themselves,
right?
And that makes intuitive sense if you're new to our system.
If you're going to ask me to do this, you must know what it's like to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Where the actual job of a heavy equipment boss is not operator. That's why there's a difference. It's not a prerequisite to have run heavy equipment. That experience is that the fire experience is actually what that what expertise that person brings to the position for the most part. But yeah, we've had those two confused, and then the heavy equipment boss saying, well, I just assumed that if you were willing to take it on, then you obviously thought it was safe.
Right.
And the operator going, well, if you asked me to do it, you obviously think it's possible.
Right.
And then not having the dialogue, because we all do that.
Right.
So that's any relationship.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Yes, it is. Talk about another conversation for another day. But no, there's an event here, and I've just pulled it up on the webpage, and we'll put a link in the description of this podcast here. The Weiser Complex dozer rollover from 2013 ended up being a fireline fatality, and it's a really well done report, FLA, and that sentiment that we were just talking about there was expressed really precisely in this report. And again, we'll put a link to it, and you you can read all about that. And whether that's the contractor's dilemma that we're talking about here or not, it certainly illustrates this idea that if we want to have an open, honest, mature discussion about risk and hazard out there on the fire line, we need to recognize that all of us out there have different pressures bearing down on us. Pressure to get a task book signed off, pressure to to get 16s with H, pressure to get a good evaluation. In the case of the contractors, a good evaluation in the case of the trainee, somebody who's from outside the area, et cetera. All these pressures.
Or working towards a certification.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Type 2 trying to become type 1.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are pressures.
Yep. And there is maybe there's no silver bullet solution for, how to mitigate them, but being aware that they're present, and they're probably always present, but with certain groups of folks, they might be present more commonly. And I think that's the point here. That's what we're trying to talk about today with this particular contractor's dilemma. So, what do you do differently now? I mean, what was your lesson after? This was a couple years ago in Idaho. How do you handle contractors? How do you handle folks from outside of the area? What do you do differently? What's your lesson?
Well, specific to water tenders, because for a while I was really focused on just that group. I don't tell them to go drive a road that we haven't gotten in my truck and driven up myself. The very next fire that I went on after that, I was just about to do it. I was going to ask somebody to go, and I thought of that, and I said, "Hey, let's go take a ride. Jump in my truck." And the tender operator in this instance was actually resistant to it. They thought it was inefficient.
Let me get to work.
Yes, exactly. And I said, "No.
Yeah.
I want to go take a look at this."
Right. You work for me.
Yes.
For better or worse.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
dude.
exactly. Sucks for you, but I'm in charge here, so.
And we jumped in the truck and we drove up there, and lo and behold, we got to this point where there was no turnaround spot. There was one of those point of no return type deals, and we navigated in the truck. And we both came to the conclusion. I said, "Man, what do you think?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll take it back up there to the top, but I don't know about coming down this far." And then we got with an engine, and they said, "Oh yeah, we can actually just run hose," and we figured out a way to get the job done. But we didn't have to expose them to figuring that out. Scouting, and it seems like a super simple lesson,
right?
Scout where you're going to go, of course. I mean,
right.
That makes perfect sense.
So much easier, so often easier said than done, though, is the bottom line. It's an easy thing to skip.
Exactly,
especially when there's a lot of momentum out there.
And there's an added layer of difficulty around that conversation, I think, when it's a contractor.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And even just with staffing.
Yeah.
A federal water tender probably has, might be more likely to have a couple people on it.
Sure. Yeah.
Or they might just be more comfortable asking the green engine next to them, "Hey, can you tell me what's down there?"
Right.
Comfortable with the radio, whatever.
Yep. A bigger red card, or a red card for that matter. I mean, plenty of our equipment operators have the bare necessity, right?
Yeah.
And our agency folks might have, certainly generally have more quals and experience. So, yeah.
So anyway, that's just specific to tender operators. But then, contractors in general, one thing I have started doing, and I don't know that it alleviates anything, is I hand out blank evals for me.
Okay.
Like when I first get there. I go, "Here you go. Here's an eval on my supervisor's address." Just as a way to try and level the playing field.
Yeah. Give a bunch of power away right there, huh?
Exactly, because and I've regretted it sometimes too, because I'm like, dang,
Sure.
we had some conflicts there. But I have heard that leveling of the playing field, or it's not really level, but it makes a gesture. Hey, I understand. Maybe I don't understand, but it's a gesture.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had people appreciate it, and then I've had other people that don't care. They just don't fill it out. But I've had a lot of people fill it out, and in most cases just give it right back to me.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
So that's one thing I do specifically with contractors, and then I ask them right up front, hey, what are your concerns in regards to evals and stuff like that? What are
Right.
Let's just talk about it. Just break that ice.
Yeah.
Because I got really upset on that same fire, actually, because I walked behind one of the crews, and there was trash. They had left some trash, and it was very obviously from the crew. It's like Gatorade bottles and Skittles packets or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just went off on one of the end of shift things about how that was not something I wanted to see on my division.
Mm-hmm.
But then right after that, I went and I said, hey man, this isn't about your eval. I just don't want there to be any more trash. And as soon as I brought it up and said, if once we remedy this, then I'm going to be that much more likely to give you a great eval.
Sure.
But in that moment, I just had to address it right there,
Right.
and then follow up right away to address the concerns about the eval.
Yeah.
Man. So yeah, just putting it out there. Talk about the things that are, and think about what the tensions are for that other group. I don't know.
Yeah. What their pressures might be.
Sure.
That's great. There's a bunch of stuff there, and so many of these things we deal with come down to having a conversation. But before you have the conversation, being aware that these are pressures that folks might be dealing with. That's good stuff, Travis. With that, we're going to wrap it up for this podcast. We're new to this podcast stuff. Tell us what you think in comments below. Are you a contractor? Have you been in that kind of situation before? Leave a comment. Tell us about your experience. Send us an email, send us a tweet, send us a postcard. You can find contact information for Travis and I both at wildfirelessons.net. Look in the upper right-hand corner and click on the Contact Us button. You'll find our emails and our phone numbers there. You can get us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube as well. If you've got something you want us to chat about in another podcast, let us know in the comments below. We'll catch you next time. Thanks.